than to disapply the ECHR.
Well, I am grateful for the question from the right honourable gentleman. I do have a can-do attitude, and I am willing to do everything we can as a government to ensure that we get this right and we keep our public safe and our prison officers safe and we keep dangerous criminals locked up where they belong. What I can tell him is he will be aware that the legal proceedings are still ongoing. As I reiterate, we are looking at all options available here, including the right to appeal, because we will be as responsible and effective with taxpayers' money as possible.
Andrew Snowden.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Hashim Abedi was in a separation centre at HMM Frankland when he attacked 3 prison officers with hot cooking oil. Under these rulings and these interventions on European courts determining the human rights of these convicted and violent terrorists, does the Minister really think it would be appropriate for this individual to be given access to a kitchen?
Yeah.
Well, I will not preempt the findings and the outcome of Jonathan Hall's review, but what I will tell him is that we believe in separation centres. They are a valuable tool, as the judgments state. What we are ensuring is that all of our prison officers are kept safe, and once the recommendations are published of Jonathan Hall's review and the government has carefully considered those recommendations, I will happily speak with him and work with him to ensure that they are followed through.
James Wilde.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This terrorist was moved to a separation centre over concerns that he would use his extremist Islamist ideology to radicalise others. Yet the ruling says that this move was a breach of his right to a private life under the European Convention. Shouldn't national security and prison officers' safety come first? And will she rule out paying any money to this terrorist?
Again, I echo my previous comments. We cannot preempt the judicial decision, and we are looking at all rights to that in terms of appeal here regarding that point. But on the separation centres, look, there is select criteria for prisoners dedicated to going into a separation centre. Prisoners will only be selected if other options have all been considered, and that this is not the case if it is the most desirable location. They are entitled to challenge their selection and raise complaints if needed. However, our priority remains, as I have stated, to the safety and security of our prisons, our prison staff and the general public.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The key issue here is that, of course, making a decision about whether someone goes into a secluded area and kept away from other prisoners is a judgment call. So what assessment has the Minister made of the implications of this judgment on what will happen to terrorists who should be separated from other prisoners?
I thank you for that question. Look, separation centres were never intended for use with all terrorist offenders. They exist to separate the most pernicious radicalisers, and we are achieving this aim successfully using the current separation centres capacity, which is kept under regular review. We are awaiting the findings of the Jonathan Hall review, and we will be looking at the judgment from yesterday's decision closely to ensure that all steps are taken and that we are working with governors, prison officers to ensure the best steps forward. But we are determined to ensure that prisons are kept safe.
Final question, Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for her answers. And Minister, always trying to be helpful, of course, in relation to it. In Northern Ireland, we've dealt with the spread of extreme forms of paramilitarism within our prisons, and have learned that the most hard-line prisoners, their influence easily and completely spreads to those who enter prisons for perhaps petty crime, and we're coming out the other end with hatred that they never felt before. Those with extremist views should not be able to consolidate and proselytise or convert people to extremist views, and younger inmates in particular. Others have referred to legislative change. Could I ask the Minister, perhaps, because of what we've learned in Northern Ireland, would it be helpful to contact the Prisons Minister in the Northern Ireland Assembly to get their ideas of how they've done it, and perhaps we can be helpful for each other? Thank you.
I am grateful to that question and the extension of an offer to help. I will ensure that that is followed up with our counterparts in Northern Ireland. Look, we will follow the evidence and do what works in order to keep our prisons safe. We will assess the risks of any further radicalisation within our separation centres and our prisons to ensure that this is not happening, that anyone with a danger that these individuals pose to extend their views to the prison population or to the public are kept under review. And I look forward to working with counterparts in Northern Ireland to share knowledge and expertise to ensure that we get this right for everyone across the United Kingdom.
Can I thank the Minister for her short, sharp answers this morning, perhaps a masterclass for what is to follow. Business questions will run for an hour and no more this morning. I'll allow a few moments for the front bench to swap over. Brings us to business questions this morning. Shadow Leader of the House.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Will the Leader of the House give us the forthcoming business?
Leader of the House.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The business for the week commencing 24th of November will include Monday the 24th of November, remaining stages of the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill, Day 1. Tuesday the 25th of November, remaining stages of the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill, Day 2. On Wednesday the 26th of November, my right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, will deliver her budget statement. And on the Thursday the 27th of November, a continuation of the budget statement. Friday the 28th of November, the House will not be sitting. The provisional business for the week commencing the 1st of December includes Monday the 1st of December, continuation of the budget debate, Tuesday the 2nd of December, conclusion of the budget debate, Wednesday the 3rd of December, remaining stages of the pension schemes bill, Thursday the 4th of December, debate on a motion on the war in Ukraine, followed by a general debate on St Andrew's Day. The subject for these debates were determined by the Backbench Business Committee, and Friday the 5th of December, the House will not be sitting.
Leader of the House.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I start by recording my thanks to the Leader of the House for agreeing to the request to have the Ukraine debate on December the 4th. I think we all feel very warmly about that decision. Madam Deputy Speaker, politics at the present moment may not be enormously pretty, but it has been a week of triumph in the sporting world. We have had the joyous mayhem of Scotland reaching their first World Cup for 28 years, but let us not forget the extraordinary thumping which the England rugby team dealt out to the All Blacks at the weekend, or the perfect World Cup qualification record of our English footballers. In that spirit, I hope many, if perhaps not all, members of this House will join me in sending our best wishes to the England cricket team as they prepare for the opening test in Perth tomorrow. Madam Deputy Speaker, this has been another week in which the headlines have not been kind to the government and its allies. They have reported that the Prime Minister has spent a sixth of his time in office abroad. That is 2.5 months to date outside the UK since the last election. Half of all UK jobs lost since the government came to power are among the under-25s. That's 80,000 more young people out of work since July 2024. Agency staff brought into work during Birmingham's 8-month-long bin strike by members of Unite have now themselves decided to go on strike. The former Deputy Prime Minister is reported to be planning a leadership bid following last week's speculation about the Health Secretary and last month's unfortunate foray by the Mayor of Manchester. Since Labour took office, the energy price cap has not fallen but risen by £187 to £1,755. Madam Deputy Speaker, I often wonder if the government has forgotten that there is a world outside London and our biggest cities. So in that spirit, I hope I may raise a couple of important issues on which I'd be grateful for the Leader's assistance. The first is local. Last weekend, the village of Lewis Harold in my constituency was devastated by flooding as a result of Storm Claudia. The village was inundated after record levels of rainfall flooded the Dewless Brook, with water levels rising to the highest ever recorded by the monitoring station. The emergency services were called out to help vulnerable residents and houses. Local pubs and other businesses were severely damaged. Many local people have been involved in clearing up the mess, in particular the brilliant Young Farmers Club, but it will take months for the village to get fully back on its feet. The House, you will know, Madam Deputy Speaker, was given time to debate the severe flooding in nearby Monmouthshire in Wales yesterday. So may I ask the Leader of the House now if he would encourage both the Environment Agency and DEFRA to take the swiftest and most comprehensive action to protect Lewis Harold and other flood-hit areas across England in order to prevent this from happening again. The second issue is a national one. The Listed Places of Worship grant scheme helps thousands of churches, synagogues, mosques and temples and other places of worship to reclaim or to get grants to cover the VAT paid on repair and maintenance work. It's a small but very useful and cost-effective institution that has quietly worked away over more than 2 decades to preserve the historic fabric of our nation. Unfortunately, since the last election, the size of the scheme has been cut in half and a new cap imposed on the level of individual grants. It's a feature of these repairs that if they are not made, the damage often leads to enormous further costs. Government seems determined to maintain or increase public spending in other areas. Given that and the very small relative sums involved, could I ask the Leader to pick this matter up with the Department of Culture, Media and Sport and see if this scheme cannot be quickly restored to its previous glory?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Shadow Leader for his questions. Can I first of all, through you, Madam Deputy Speaker, thank Mr Speaker for his timely reminder this week of our responsibilities in this House regarding national security. As the House will know, the Security Service issued an espionage alert to Parliament highlighting targeted outreach by Chinese Ministry of State Security to individuals in our community. This is a very serious matter which the Government takes very seriously, and I know Mr Speaker does too. So I would urge all MPs to heed this advice and report any suspicious activity immediately. Next week, Madam Deputy Speaker, is Parliament Week, where we encourage young people and the public to engage with the UK's democratic system and institutions. And in that spirit, I was delighted yesterday to meet with children from East Hunsbury Primary School, winners of the Kind School Award, this week after the Honourable Member for Northampton South raised the school during business questions. It was a great pleasure to meet with them. They were a credit to their school, their parents, but most of all to themselves. And it's a reminder to us all of the importance of being kind. And you will be pleased to know, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I've been made an honorary kindness ambassador. Which I have to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, is an honour which I never received during my time as the Chief Whip. I was, as the Honourable Gentleman has already said, pleased to announce in this week's business that the Backbench Business Committee has chosen Ukraine as a subject for their forthcoming debate on the 4th of December, and I thank the Shadow Leader, I thank the Liberal Democrat spokesman, the member for Carshalton and Wallington, and the Honourable Member for Harwich and North Essex for their representations to help secure the debate. And members will welcome, Madam Deputy Speaker, the publication of the Men's Health Strategy this week, an important topic which again has been raised frequently during business questions. The strategy will address the stark inequalities in men's health to create a society where men and boys are supported to live healthier and happier lives. And I would encourage members to engage in the debate later today on International Men's Day. And as the Honourable Gentleman has said, it's been a good week for sport. And I want to congratulate Scotland for qualifying for the World Cup for the first time since 1998. And just remind the House that the only time that a home nation has actually won the World Cup was under a Labour government. Let me turn to the remarks of the Shadow Leader and address some of his list, at least. He complains about the amount of time that the Prime Minister has spent abroad. Well, that reflects two things, I think, above all, Madam Deputy Speaker. One is the uncertainty of the international situation. But the second is he spent a great deal of time addressing the issue of trade and bringing investment into this country. And therefore, when the Honourable Gentleman raises the issue of jobs, he's surely got to realise that getting good trade deals, which his government was not prepared to do or able to do, will actually not only bring investment to our country, but it will actually turn into jobs, hopefully, across our nation. He quite rightly raises the issue of flooding, and I will draw to the attention of DEFRA and the Environment Agency the urgency of this situation in ensuring, as far as we can, that preparations are made should this happen in the future. But I would gently also encourage him to encourage some of his colleagues on his side of the House to actually start recognising the effect of climate change. Thirdly, he talks about the listed place of worship, and as a constituency MP, he has absolutely every right to do so. I have to say, his constituency and neighbouring constituencies have some fantastic churches, and many of them are in need of repair going forward. I'm not going to comment on matters of VAT or possibly tax changes. We've only a few days before the budget, but I will draw his concerns not only to the attention of DCMS, but also to the Treasury. Thank you.
Barry Gardner.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the speedy passage of environmental legislation through this House is not often a feature. So can I thank the Leader of the House for the speedy way in which the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdictions Treaty was dealt with by the government. In contrast, can I remind him that in 2023, our party said that we would bring forward legislation for a new Clean Air Act. Now, I've no doubt that the Leader of the House is thinking of what may be going into the King's Speech next year. Given that it will be the 70th anniversary of the original Clean Air Act, could he perhaps put that one forward as something that this House really does need to look at to ensure that we are meeting the WHO standards?
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's comments, Madam Deputy Speaker, and the Biodiversity Treaty is an important step forward. And I thank him for all the work that he has done in this regard. The government is committed to environmental improvement, and although I expect that the second session will be quite crowded, I'll certainly bear in mind his comments.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Bobby Dean.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I join the Leader in a thanks to the Speaker for the seriousness in which he's taking the Chinese interference in our democracy. I represent many Hong Kongers in my constituency and they're deeply concerned about this issue. Madam Deputy Speaker, it was a relief to hear that it's confirmed that the budget will be taking place on the floor of this House next week. I'm sure it'll be a huge relief also to advisers in the Treasury, who've just got days away now to start leaking the 2026 budget. One thing that people will be looking out for in the budget next week is what provisions are going to be made for children with special educational needs and disabilities. I'm fully aware that this is a crisis that was inherited by this government, but it was one that was not unforeseen. We're 18 months into this government now, and we've heard that their major reform plans have been pushed back again. So that is a disappointment to us on those benches. We're seeing councils go bankrupt over this, teachers are in despair, families are being held in legal limbo, and ultimately we're failing children at the end of all this. And I do appreciate that there are some really tricky issues to resolve. We need to balance the legal entitlements on paper with the quality provision in reality, and we do need to adjust to this world where there are greater diagnosis rates than there were before. But I think there are some actions that the government could take right away, in particular in relation to, Madam Deputy Speaker, the private placements that are ongoing. These have trebled in the last decade. They cost more than double the cost of a state placement, around about £60,000. And what we do know is that private equity have been really aggressive in this space, taking on institutions, eating up market share, and are reportedly making profit margins around about 20%. Now, in the Children Wellbeing and Schools Bill, the government did introduce the idea of profit caps on those that are being exploitative in the children's social care sector. So I wonder if the Leader can ask the relevant minister if this could be extended to the SEND schools as well.
Speaker, he's right to raise concern about the SEND system because the government has acknowledged that it is broken. It doesn't work for parents and it doesn't work for children either. He's also right to say that there were signs that things were not as they should be, but it's one of the many issues that when we came to government we discovered was even worse than we'd anticipated beforehand. I'm not going to comment on what might or might not be in the budget, but I would gently point out that we've already invested an additional £1 billion into SEND. And we're also creating more specialist places in mainstream schools with an additional £740 million on top of the £1 billion. We will be bringing forward the schools white paper. He may wish to keep some of his suggestions to that, or maybe call a debate on it to give further clarity to what he's saying. We're bringing that forward early in the next year. I know it is frustrating. It's frustrating for our constituents as well. But the important thing is we need to work with parents and we need to work with teachers. And the most important thing is that we get it right.
Rosie Writing.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On that note, since being elected, the number of constituents who've raised difficulties and delays in the SEND system with me has been staggering. So I asked my constituents to fill in my SEND survey online so they can feed into the government's schools white paper. That survey now has 250 responses, which I think shows the extent of the problem. So will the Leader of the House join me in thanking those parents in Kettering, but across the country, who are using their own experiences to feed in to this government's mission to fix a broken system we inherited?
Very pleased to do that, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I would like to thank everyone who has responded to my honourable friend's survey. That is the way one of the very best ways of getting information from parents, and the scale of that demonstrates the scale of the problems in the system. But I also want to pay tribute to her for the work that she has done on this issue. As I said previously, we are committed to creating a SEND system which truly works for children and for their parents. As the White Paper comes forward, I'm sure my honourable friends' constituents' comments will be reflected in that process.
Chair of the Backbench Business Committee, Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Leader for announcing the business for the 4th of December in the Chamber. I understand that there is a potential that the House may suspend for a period of time because of a state visit. So I would ask, could he give consideration for protected time, because these are two very heavily subscribed debates. Also, if you can give us an indication as to whether we'll get the 11th of December in the Chamber, because we're now in the position whereby, with our backlog of debates, if we have every Thursday between now and the Easter recess, we can fill every single debate. I note that the House rose very early yesterday, and if the government is having a problem with business, we can always put on debates to allow colleagues from the backbenches to debate what they wish to debate in government time. If we're given Thursday the 18th of December, it will be the traditional pre-recess adjournment debate for Christmas. The business in Westminster Hall next week, on Tuesday the 25th, will be a debate on potential impact of immigration reforms on humanitarian visa routes. And on Thursday the 27th, there'll be because of the budget debate in the Chamber, there will be a Select Committee statement from the Business and Trade Committee, followed by debates on the impact of extended producer responsibility for packaging, followed by a debate on protecting children from domestic abuse. On the 2nd of December, there will be a debate on the adequacy of funding to support homeless people, and on the 4th of December, a debate on comprehensive acquired brain injury action plan, followed by a debate on seafarers' welfare. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, today is the 80th anniversary of the start of the Nuremberg trials. And earlier this week, we had a very good briefing at the All-Party Parliamentary Group for the Holocaust Memorial and Education Centre from Adam Wagner. He's a renowned human rights lawyer. 24 Nazis were put on trial, and the trial lasted for 11 months. At the end of that, 22 of them were sentenced to either very long-term prison sentences or death. 2, amazingly enough, were acquitted. So it would be, I think, very helpful if we could have a statement from the Education Secretary on incorporating the business of the Nuremberg trials into the national curriculum, because this was the first time when human rights law started to come to the fore, particularly on war crimes and crimes against humanity. So I would ask the Leader, could he arrange for that to happen?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I certainly welcome the honourable gentleman back to his place and thank him for raising these important matters. On the later matters that he raises, the Nuremberg trials do mark a reassertion of justice, human rights and accountability, and the 80th anniversary is a stark reminder of the need to commit to international criminal justice, and it is one of the government's top priorities in supporting the international legal order. I'll give consideration to what he says about a statement, but also make sure that the Secretary of State for Education is aware of the honourable gentleman's comments. On the question of protected time, I would certainly give consideration to that. He knows that I'm sympathetic to that. I don't think it's appropriate in every occasion, but I do think it's sympathetic should the House be adjourned for any, suspended for any particular reason. And I'll let him know about the 11th of December at the earliest opportunity. But just let me gently say to him, yes, of course, this week has been a little bit up and down in terms of the hours and the debates and the statements that we had. It's always a slight difficulty in getting balance into that, but it's not a problem for the government and its business. It's a problem for the opposition. If they can't turn up in numbers to hold the government to account, what are they doing?
Chris Hinchliffe.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Nearly 2/3 of the land in our country is owned by a handful of aristocrats, oligarchs and bankers who often hide their wealth in trusts and corporations which never die. So can we have a debate on how we may raise more revenue from these ultra-rich landowners and so afford some more generous proposals on agricultural property relief for the farmers who are essential for our food security, nature restoration and climate action?
I'm grateful for my honourable friend in raising this issue and join with him in acknowledging the vital work that farmers do, which is one of the reasons why we're investing £5 billion over 2 years into the farming budget. I'm not going to preempt the budget, and therefore I would say, having just announced 4 days of budget debate, I'm sure that my honourable friend will wish to raise these points and amplify these points during that time.
Clive Jones.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Brain tumour research state that 1 in 3 people are likely to know someone with a brain tumour. That could be our friends, family or constituents. Brain tumours are a cruel disease, and yet drug development and research has stagnated, denying patients access to life-saving treatment. Will the Leader of the House allow a debate in government time on the immediate investment needed to improve brain tumour research and improve outcomes?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd invite the honourable gentleman to request a debate, either an adjournment debate or a backbench business debate, because I think what that will illustrate is not just from a constituency point of view, but how many of us have been affected personally or family or friends with the terrible consequences that can arise from brain tumours. The government is absolutely committed to doing as much as they can in this regard, not least through the 10-year health plan. So I think the debate would be a great opportunity, not just to hear about the problem, but to hear about what the government is intending to do about it.
Kirstine Sullivan.
Madam Deputy Speaker. Churches are the bedrock of our communities and play a particularly strong role at the heart of our villages. St Philomena's Church in Winchborough has been a centre of spiritual, community and cultural life for 100 years and celebrated this milestone with a special Mass led by Archbishop Leo Cushley on the 26th of October. Will the Leader of the House join me in congratulating Father Deacon, Father Henderson and Deacon Robertson, as well as the congregation of St Philomena's, and wish them all the best for the years ahead?
Speaker, I will join with my honourable friend in congratulating Father Henderson, Deacon Robertson and the parishioners of the venerable parish of St Philomena. As she rightly points out, places of worship provide a variety of services, often above and beyond the religious purpose in the strictest sense that they are there for. They're at the very heart of our local communities, and I wish them well for the next 100 years.
Julian Lewis.
Last Thursday, there was a heavily subscribed debate in Westminster Hall about the terrible problem of rogue and con men builders who fleece people of thousands upon thousands of pounds for work never completed and often not done at all. May we have a statement from an appropriate minister on the need to consider criminalising this process whereby people are robbed of their money but told afterwards that it only constitutes a civil offence?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Right Honourable Gentleman raises a really important matter, and he will know, having been in this House for quite some time, it's a perennial problem. I will draw it to the attention of the Minister and see whether a statement or perhaps he might wish to seek a debate on these matters.
David Burton-Sampson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. At this time of year, the fireworks debate always rages. As a dog owner, I too share the views of my constituents in Southend Weston Lee that we need safer, more controlled firework legislation, not just for the sake of animals, but for people too. I recently met with the Fireworks Impact Coalition, who are also calling for a review. Will the Leader grant a debate in government time to discuss this important issue further?
I thank my honourable friend for raising this question. He isn't the first member to raise it with me, particularly over the last few weeks. As he knows, it's not just a question of the run-up to bonfire night, but we're approaching end-of-year celebrations as well, and pet owners will once again be worried for their pets. It's important that measures are proportionate with regard to fireworks, but it is such a big topic for MPs. I do think if he was to get a debate on this, he would find it particularly well attended.
Vera Hobhouse.
Madam Deputy Speaker. Today I'm speaking on behalf of one constituent, but there are many similar examples. This constituent, who doesn't want to be named because to protect herself, is losing out quite substantially financially because the child maintenance service is failing to enforce the regular payments she is owed. The non-resident parent makes one partial payment after another and then simply defaults again. The CMS has the necessary powers but is not using them effectively to stop this cycle. So can we have a debate in government time on how the CMS can actually enforce timely payments of child maintenance?
Speaker, the Honourable Lady raises an issue which again is a fairly constant matter in our constituency postbags and inboxes. The CMS is committed to ensuring that separated parents support their children financially and that powers should be used. But in all too many cases, as she alludes to, that isn't happening. So I will raise it with the appropriate minister if she lets me have details in confidence and see if we can resolve the matter.
Dave Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This weekend, a very special service will be leaving the station at Chasewater Railway in Burntwood in my constituency. The Hospital Santa Special Charity Trains are a Christmas service for seriously ill children offered completely free of charge. This year, 1,300 kids and their families are expected to attend. So can I ask if the Leader of the House will join me in congratulating Chasewater Railway, their trustees and their fantastic volunteers for the wonderful work that they're doing, spreading the festive spirit.
I'm happy to do so, Madam Deputy Speaker, congratulating Chasewater Railway for spreading this joy this holiday season. He talks about a huge number of people that will be part of that, and I thank Chasewater Railway for that. But of course it happens, these initiatives happen, not just because of the rail, but the volunteers that play their part. So I want to place on record our thanks to them and indeed volunteers across the country.
Wendy Morton.
Deputy Speaker, this week the Birmingham bin strike escalated further, and now even the agency workers who've been keeping a minimal service going have voted to join the strike from the 1st of December. I did raise this with the Leader of the House previously. I've been promised a statement, but the situation has only gotten worse since then. So can the Leader assure me that we will get that statement before this new wave of action begins to take place next month? Thank you.
Deputy Speaker, the Honourable Lady knows that our priority has always been Birmingham residents, and it's an issue in the first instance for employers, but it is important that the Council works with Unite to end the strike, which is the end of the strike is long overdue, and to work with the Council to tackle the concerns regarding agency and long-standing issues of equal pay. We remain in close contact with the Council. We continue to monitor the situation. MHCLG are looking into this and will update the House at the earliest opportunity.
Ms Twist.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yesterday evening I had the privilege of hosting the British Standards Institute at a reception in Speaker's House to mark the launch of the UK's first national suicide prevention standard, Suicide in the Workplace. It's a huge step forward in making suicide prevention everybody's business, and I want to thank all those involved. Can we have a debate in government time on how we can support employers and other organisations to implement and make the most of this important guidance?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to thank my honourable friend for her tireless campaigning on this topic. As she knows, the government is committed to reducing the number of lives lost to suicide. It remains the biggest killer of men under 50. And we have announced investment in suicide prevention projects for men as part of the first ever men's health strategy for England. I think her concerns will be shared across the House, and I would suggest that she should call for a debate in Westminster Hall. Thank you.
Dave Dugan.
Because I don't understand the mindset of an absent parent that would try and renege on their financial responsibilities to support their children. Neither, it seems, does the CMS understand their mindset either, because one of the manifold issues with the CMS is absent parents reneging on the payments, then they start the payments, then they stop the payments, then they start the payments, and the CMS resets the clock every time. So the receiving parent has to start from the very beginning every time. Can we please have a debate on the manifold issues with the CMS on government time and try and find a way forward from this deeply dysfunctional agency?
Much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I will draw the honourable gentleman's comments to the attention of ministers, because as he's just heard, it's the second time that it's been raised this morning. He wished to initiate such a debate, however, because as I suggested before, concerns are shared, I'm sure, across the House.
Nick Smith.
Madam Deputy Speaker, coal miners powered our great country in the 20th century. They need justice in this century with their pensions. Labour put right the mine workers' pension scheme, but parity is needed for the British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme.
Here, here.
Can the Leader of the House please ask the Treasury for a statement on pension justice for our mining communities to right this historic wrong?
Hear, hear. I thank the honourable gentleman for all of his work on this issue, Madam Deputy Speaker. He's raised it a number of times with me, and indeed colleagues have raised it a number of times in business questions. So there is a real interest there. Ministers continue to meet with the BCSS trustees, but as my honourable friend knows, I've just announced the future business, and there'll be two opportunities. The first is that we will have a debate following the budget where he may wish to go into more detail about this, but also there's some pension legislation coming down the track too.
Andrew Rossendale.
Madam Deputy Speaker, concerns have been raised across the country by animal lovers, most especially by Katie Amos, the daughter of our late dear friend, who's continuing the battle for animal welfare across the country. The concerns are that 7-day statutory period of many healthy dogs are not being offered for adoption in homes that take in stray animals, that instead they are euthanased without transparency. For example, one shelter receiving dogs from several councils lists only a handful available for rehoming, despite far higher intake figures. This lack of accountability is deeply troubling. So, will the Leader of the House make time for members to examine whether stronger reporting requirements and safeguards are needed to protect these animals? And may we have a debate on the welfare of stray dogs transferred by local authorities to contracted shelters?
The honourable gentleman raises very sad and often abhorrent cases, actually, where this happens, and he's absolutely right to raise this. Should he seek a debate, he could perhaps amplify his message, and others could join with him, so that anyone who is engaged in the practices that he's talking about recognises the scale of the concern. And if they can't change their, the way in which they work or the way in which they operate, then the government will need to consider whether or not legislation is adequate.
Chris Bloor.
Jerry Marsden has been collecting for the Poppy Appeal in Redditch for 40 years. Since becoming the Poppy Appeal organiser, he has helped to raise over £500,000. At the same time, he has readily stepped in to lead the local Royal British Legion to ensure our town celebrates and marks the sacrifice made by those to protect our freedoms. Jerry will hate me doing this, but would the Leader of the House join me in thanking Jerry and all those that support him for his incredible contribution to Redditch and for all those that have served?
Delighted to do so, Madam Deputy Speaker, and let me say a big thank you to Jerry and indeed everyone else involved with the Redditch Royal British Legion fundraising campaign. But let me also extend that, Madam Deputy Speaker, to all the volunteers across our country who do such a fantastic job, particularly at this time of year, but of course throughout the year. Thank you.
Helen Morgan.
Deputy Speaker, my constituents are no strangers to flooding, whether that's from the Rivers Severn and Vyrnwy in villages like Melverley, or from surface water or inadequate infrastructure in Gebowen and Hadnall. But the Environment Agency says that another 1,600 properties in my constituency will be vulnerable to surface water flooding by 2050, and the Planning and Infrastructure Bill has failed to address flooding or climate change at all. So given that the government voted down my amendments and those of my Lib Dem colleagues intended to tackle this problem, can we have a debate or a statement from the relevant minister on how the UK is going to build flood resilience in the future?
Madam Deputy Speaker, it is a concern across many constituencies. I'm sorry to hear what's happening in the Honourable Lady's constituency, but again, I'd invite her to seek a debate, because there are many areas that will share their concern, and she can put those questions directly to ministers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. 110 years ago this month, Mary Barber, who was born in Cobarkin in my constituency, led the Glasgow rent strikes, standing up to improve housing conditions for working people. The legacy of that strike gave us the Rent Restrictions Act, a landmark safeguard that shielded tenants from exploitative profiteering right up until the wave of Thatcher-era deregulation. Will the Leader of the House join me in recognising Mary's legacy and also perhaps calling out the SNP government in Holyrood for undermining it, with 13 councils across Scotland now forced to declare a housing emergency and 10,000 children in Scotland left stuck in homeless accommodation?
Thank you very much indeed. I will join my honourable friend in recognising the important legacy of Mary Barber. I would invite her perhaps to seek an adjournment debate in which she could not only highlight the housing emergency which she refers to in Scotland, but she might also want to put on record that Scotland has secured a record funding settlement this year, and therefore they should be held to account for that.
Because
thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yesterday I attended the drop-in session in aid of those who suffer from Huntington's disease. And as is often the case when you attend these events, they sign you up as a champion, which they duly did with me. So my first role as champion is to highlight the new NICE guidelines that have been issued for those suffering from this disease, and hope that the League could perhaps ask the Health Secretary to bring forward a statement to explain how quickly these new guidelines can be implemented to help those suffering from this awful disease.
Congratulate the honourable gentleman in being a champion. It's been a good week for awards for us, really, between us, kindness and champion. Huntington's disease is a terrible disease, and it's fantastic work by people across communities that have kept this in the mind's eye, and also that NICE guidelines are addressing that, and the need for speed, I'm sure, is in the minds of those who are involved. So I will raise this matter with the Health Secretary.
Marinda Just.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last weekend, I attended the annual conference of Interfaith Wolverhampton in my constituency of Wolverhampton West, who have done much to bring different faith communities together, including those of no faith, and to celebrate diversity, which is so needed at a time when we are facing division and hate crime. However, the Conservative government withdrew all funding from the National Interfaith Network charity, forcing it to shut down. So will the Leader of the House please meet with me and the relevant minister to discuss restoration of the National Interfaith Network so that it can provide support again for interfaith organisations across the country?
Madam Deputy Speaker, interfaith relations are absolutely vital for strong and cohesive communities, and last week was Interfaith Week, a chance for communities to come together and celebrate different faiths and beliefs. I will make sure that ministers have heard my honourable friend's specific concerns, and of course I'm always happy to meet with them.
Tessa Munt.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to return, if I may, to the listed places of worship scheme. And although departmental policy is to keep grant funding records for 7 years, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport uses grant records only for the last 3 years since 2022, as only that data is considered reliable. I wondered if the Leader of the House will... he will know that the backbench business debates are taken until the next King's speech, and there's a massive queue for Westminster Hall and adjournment debates, but in hope and endless optimism, I might ask him for a debate about financial record keeping, as neither the Secretary of State nor the Treasury can possibly assess the value and importance and impact of schemes like this if they've no idea where the money's gone, and because record keeping is so poor, or it's inaccurate, or the records have been lost.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I accept that the backbench business list is long, but adjournment debates are chosen frequently, and I would encourage colleagues to request them and see where they get to. But again, as I mentioned before, Treasury matters are things that she may wish to raise in the budget debate. She doesn't need wait for an adjournment debate. She could raise matters in the budget.
Maya Ellis.
Madam Deputy Speaker, Preston-based Keytech in my constituency is a British-based and owned technology and engineering company which employs around 50 staff and provides the live update data and displaced for almost 80% of all UK rail passenger journeys, including much of the London Underground. Their biggest competitors, Hitachi, Siemens, etc., are all foreign-owned, but when I visited the company last week, their chief executive, Denise Lawrenson, shared that in a recent meeting she'd had with DfT officials, she was advised that while buying local is encouraged in government procurement, there is no firm accountability, leading to many contracts still going abroad rather than investing in British companies and British growth. Would the leader join me in congratulating this brilliant northern tech company on their 26 years of innovation and keeping the UK moving? And might he consider a debate on how this government can put British SMEs at the heart of our growth plans?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I do join my honourable friend in thanking Keytech for their contribution over so many years, and I also thank her for her assiduous work for her constituents and for businesses in her constituency. We have consulted on further procurement reforms to boost domestic supply chains and create more opportunities for local businesses. She could seek a debate on this, but as I'm busy doing to many of the questions today, Madam Deputy Speaker, is to say we've got 4 days of budget debate in which some of these issues will be particularly relevant. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The 1st to the 7th of December is Crohn's and Colitis Awareness Week, being run by Crohn's and Colitis UK on raising awareness and generating conversations about what it's like to live with the condition. Many members in this House will know people, and they will most certainly have constituents who suffer with this condition that will never talk about it because of the stigma about talking about things relating to our bowels. Most people dismiss it as an irritable bowel or something to do with diarrhoea, when in fact it is crippling internal ulcers that generate internal bleeding and blood clots. I have watched my brave wife battle this condition for over 10 years, including 2 life-changing surgeries, the last of which required 9 hours in theatre. This is a disease that is crippling, is debilitating, and awareness is still sadly very low on it. So would the Leader of the House be willing to work across government to look at how, yes, we in this House, but how the government can work with Crohn's and Colitis UK on their Awareness Week so that we can all play our role in raising awareness of what this condition really is?
Grateful, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the way in which the honourable gentleman has raised this. He's absolutely right to bring this to the floor of the House. It is a really debilitating condition. And it will affect a large number of people across our constituencies. I will join with him in any way that we can to work cross-party in order to highlight that during that week. But also I think it's, at this point, I'll offer a meeting with ministers, actually, so that you can speak to them directly, not just about the scale of the problem, but also about what we're doing to tackle it.
Conor Rand.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituent Naomi was a victim of extreme online stalking, slander and harassment for several years, which had a profound impact on her mental health. And despite the perpetrator pleading guilty, it took 3 years until they were finally sentenced to prison last month. The ordeal has shattered Naomi's faith in our criminal justice system. So could we have a debate in government time for support for victims of online stalking and harassment?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank my honourable friend for raising such an important issue and to say our thoughts are with Naomi and many others who find themselves in this terrible situation. We have introduced measures to tackle stalking. We're currently undertaking a review of stalking legislation to ensure that it is fit for purpose, and our violence against women and girls strategy will also cover online and offline stalking as well. And if my honourable friend seeks a meeting with ministers to look into this further, I'm sure he'll be successful in getting one.
Ellie Chams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The UK is coming under intense scrutiny at COP30 for saying one thing in public but doing the opposite in private by apparently blocking progress on the Belém action mechanism to secure fossil-free jobs, to secure workers' rights, communities and our planet. And this is despite the Prime Minister, his statement to COP saying, literally, the UK is all in on embracing opportunities. So can we please have an urgent debate on how a shift in the backroom position of the UK could unlock negotiations, rebuild trust and align the government's actions with its public commitments? Thank you.
Madam Deputy Speaker, there is absolutely no difference between what the government is committed to and saying publicly to what we are saying in private. Some of these issues, of course, require a great deal of diplomacy. The Prime Minister himself went to COP30 and the Energy Secretary too. And when the Energy Secretary returns, I would expect one of them would make a statement on COP30 and she'll be able to put those points to them directly.
Lewis Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Our creative industries offer huge opportunity for economic growth, and the Crownworks Film Studio in Sunderland would be a box office smash for jobs across the North East. Last year, the Chancellor premiered investment to prepare the site, adding government support to that of our Labour Council and elected Mayor. That release was critically acclaimed, but people are crying out for a sequel. So will the Leader of the House confirm that there will be time in the budget debate to discuss growing the creative industries in the North East? And, as a political A-lister, will he help me to ensure that we roll out the red carpet for further investment in Crownworks?
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. My honourable friend is right to champion our creative industries. As well he knows, we have a proud record in this country. Many iconic films are filmed here, indeed in our region and indeed in my beautiful constituency. As he alludes to, there will be 4 days of debate on the budget, and that should be ample time for him to raise these thoughts. Thank you.
Matt Vickers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Stockton's Labour Council have made the decision to close 11 play parks, taking away precious facilities from children in Long Newton, Ingerby Barrack and Bishopsgarth. This is despite charging council tax amongst the highest in the country and spending £300,000 on an opening party for their urban park. Yes, £300,000 on a party. Will the Leader grant a debate on the benefits of player parks and the need for councils to spend taxpayers' money with respect?
Deputy Speaker, of course it's important that local authorities spend the money that they have wisely, but for 14 years, of course, they were starved of the resources that they need, and we're determined to put that right. He is a loud voice for his constituency. I'm sure that if he was to seek an adjournment debate, he could amplify it even further.
Natalie Fleet.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Food hygiene rating scheme means that we can celebrate 5-star venues like Aleppi Kitchen in my constituency, and we can all avoid the ones with 1 star if we choose. Councillor David Bennett from Clown is running a campaign to make it mandatory to display these ratings in England just as it is in Wales and Northern Ireland. Will the Leader of the House consider granting a debate in government time to allow us to discuss this?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My honourable friend raises some important matters, as does indeed her constituent David Bennett. This is the sort of issue I would have thought that applying for a debate, either a Westminster Hold adjournment debate or indeed a backbench business debate, would allow further discussion of that.
Max Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The last general election gave us an extremely disproportionate result, with the government getting a massive majority on just 1/3 of the vote. Current opinion polls show us that the next election is due to be even more disproportionate, with the party that's currently leading the polls likely to get a majority on around about 30%, perhaps even less. Given that that's the case, and given that there's huge support among the Labour Party for voting reform, for proportional representation, and the Honourable Member for Clacton himself supports proportional representation, isn't it time that we had a proper consideration in this House of changing the voting system so the next election is not a disaster for democracy?
We've had many discussions, Madam Deputy Speaker, and in fact the opinion was tested on whether or not the country wanted to change on these matters, and they decided that they didn't. The government doesn't have any plans to bring that forward, but that doesn't mean that the debate won't go on.
Douglas McAllister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Will the Leader of the House join me in again congratulating the Scotland men's national football team in qualifying for the 2026 World Cup, an entire team of heroes, however, not least from my West Dunbartonshire constituency. John McGinn, a former pupil of my old school, St Columbus Clydebank. Does the Leader of the House recognise that we've got McGinn, Super John McGinn? He's Stevie Clark's man, he's better than Zidane. Does the Leader of the House agree he is in fact Super John McGinn, and congratulate the entire team?
I do, Madam Deputy Speaker, congratulate the entire team, John McGinn and everyone involved, and I just gently remind him, if my memory serves me correctly, Steve Clark was in fact a Sunderland manager and perhaps honed his skills when he was there. But I just also gently remind anyone that didn't hear it before, last time they qualified, Scotland qualified, was 1998. Last time England won the World Cup was 1966, and the link there, of course, is both times had a Labour government.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Will the Leader of the House join me in congratulating Jacques Jeffries, a grandson of my constituent Susan Jeffries, on his selection for Team GB at the Winter Olympics in February, but share my frustration that he has to set up a fundraising page to make it financially possible to go? Madam Deputy Speaker, in the week that Scotland reach the World Cup and England start the Ashes campaign down under, will he recognise the soft power of sport and agree to a debate in government time on how we fund athletes, retain our place on the world stage and help those like Jacques fulfil their ambition?
I do wish Jack and all of the athletes all the success in the world, Madam Deputy Speaker. We're very proud of all of them. Of course, sometimes funding is a major issue. The government is trying to put that right because we have great faith in our young people and in particular the importance of sport in their lives. If she wishes to look for a call for debate on these matters, I'm sure there are many others across the country that through their MPs would be able to make similar points.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is National Road Safety Week, and soon the Government will unveil its much-anticipated road safety strategy. In my constituency of Rosendale and Darwin, road safety is now the issue most often raised with me and our neighbourhood police. Yet when we raise these concerns with reform leadership at Lancashire County Council, they consistently refuse to take action. Their policy is to wait for accidents to take place, stating there needs to be at least 10 collisions, of which 20% must be killed or seriously injured before they act. This flies in the face of common sense as an insult to our residents that see close calls and near misses every day. We must listen to our communities, and I've been calling on the leadership of Lancashire County Council to work with me on this, but so far they refuse to even meet. Road safety should be above local politics, and so would the Leader of the House agree to a debate in government time on this important matter?
Deputy Speaker, I thank the honourable friend for raising this question, which is timely, in Road Safety Week, and also thank him for all the work that he does on behalf of his constituents. Lancashire-led reform-led Lancashire Council comes up quite frequently, Madam Deputy Speaker, and as I've said before, but I'll repeat, it does appear that they've over-offered and they are under-delivering. If they won't meet my honourable friend, which I find astonishing actually, because whoever the leadership in the local authority is, they should be meeting with MPs. If they won't meet with it, I'm sure a Transport Minister will.
Victoria Collins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. 12-year-old Holly Goodwin from Margate last week won her category of age in the trampolining and tumbling championships in Pamplona in Spain for Great British Gymnastics. Like my honourable friend, her family had to raise money for her to go there because they don't get funding until she's 18. Will the Leader of the House join me in congratulating Holly, but also help me to secure a meeting with the Minister to see how we can support young people in sport, especially young girls and women?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I do congratulate Holly, and as I said before, everyone else involved in success in sport. So there's two from the same side of the chamber, so that's the beginnings for perhaps a debate. But actually, she raises an interesting point. I think ministers will be available to meet with the honourable ladies so that they can raise these issues with them directly.
Chris Webb.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Blackpool Council have asked for residents' views for the most ambitious and exciting regeneration project in our town's history. In less than a week, over 2,500 residents have signed my petition calling for Blackpool to build a world-class arena on the empty site on the Blackpool Central area, backed by local industry experts and local artists. A venue like this could hold major concerts, e-sport tournaments and international sporting events and secure Blackpool's legacy as a destination for world-class entertainment. Does the Leader agree with me that a project of this scale could be transformational for my hometown, which is in desperate need of an economic boost to tackle the highest level of deprivation in a place in this country?
He knows I share very much his concern about the state of some coastal towns, but also our ambition to make them better as we go forward. He is a tireless campaigner for Blackpool. There is clearly potential in the scheme that he talks about for economic growth, investment and jobs in his constituency. They are all things that this government wants to see in every part of the country and including in coastal areas like Blackpool. I think this probably falls within the parameters of a contribution to a budget debate, actually, because supporting another one, supporting coastal towns is a very, very important part of what the government is seeking to do.
Babarindi.
Speaker, today is Transgender Day of Remembrance, yet today is also the day where leaked EHRC guidance of single-sex services shockingly indicates that people could be challenged on their sex because of, quote, their appearance, behaviour or concerns by others, and turned away if, quote, there is any doubt that they are telling the truth. This would unacceptably result in trans, non-binary and potentially anyone being questioned because of how they look and would be unworkable for businesses and service providers. So will the government commit to putting a workable and inclusive proposal before this House so that Liberal Democrats can protect hard-won rights and dignity?
Mr. Speaker, and before I answer the question, may I just wish the honourable gentleman all the very best wishes, having got engaged this week, indeed in this very chamber. The government respects the court judgment. This is a serious matter. There clearly are different views on this, but the government is absolutely committed to bringing forward proposals at the earliest opportunity and giving the House an opportunity to discuss them.
Last week saw a big day for Rochdale and a big day for Greater Manchester as building works began on a world-leading research centre, which is the Sustainable Materials and Manufacturing Centre in Kingsway Business Park, backed by £15 million of this government's money. Does the Leader agree that this proves that the government's industrial strategy can boost the jobs and apprenticeships of the future to help towns like mine that have got a proud manufacturing past and present?
Much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I certainly agree with my honourable friend. This kind of investment speaks to the strength of our industrial strategy, which the whole of government is focused on delivering. He's absolutely right to draw attention to how the strategy is unlocking opportunities for young people in every part of the United Kingdom. I'm sure he will amplify the success of investment and the new manufacturing centre, what it means for Rochdale and beyond. Thank you.
Deputy Speaker, I am deeply concerned by the continuing persecution of Falun Gong practitioners in China, including some disturbing and well-documented allegations of forced organ harvesting. Will the Leader of the House please urge the Foreign Secretary to outline what concrete actions the government will take to press for an immediate end to the unethical harvesting of organs from religious minorities in China, and to ensure the protection of the Falun Gong against transnational repression in the UK? Thank you so much.
Deputy Speaker, can I thank the honourable member for raising such a serious and unreported issue, because as ever he's a real champion for religious minorities, and I commend him for his commitment to that cause. He knows that the government is committed to defending freedom of religion and belief for all. The environment for freedom of religion and belief across China is restrictive and includes persecution of Falun Gong, both in China and overseas. We do continue to monitor the situation and review evidence. And if, as he reports, these matters are true, then it would constitute a serious violation of human rights in our view. I will draw it to the attention of the Foreign Secretary, but he may also have noticed that Foreign Office questions are on the 2nd of December.
Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As we celebrate International Men's Day, can I ask the Leader of the House to join me in thanking the staff and volunteers of Men Matters in Drumchapel, who offer social, financial and emotional support to men. But can he particularly join with me in thanking Ian Sproul, who ran 10 marathons in 10 days to raise funds for the organisation? And would he be so kind as to consider visiting the organisation the next time he's in Scotland?
Indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. First of all, can I thank my honourable friend for raising this point. It is a serious one, and absolutely join her in thanking everyone involved at Men Matters for their important work and indeed the success of Ian Sproul. I'm sure that she, as the whole House knows, this week is England's first ever men's health strategy. As for her invitation, should I find myself in Scotland, I'd be delighted to accept.
Collier.
Deputy Speaker, can I warmly welcome the government's commitment to reform of business rates to boost our high streets. In New Toxteth, we have a situation where one street faces much higher rates than other parts of the high street where other businesses are exempt. This is negatively affecting owners like Joe that runs Fuelled Coffee. Could the Leader of the House find a time for a debate on how we can support community businesses like Fuelled before the new system comes into place?
Deputy Speaker, the Government is absolutely committed to supporting local businesses and local high streets, which is why we are seeking to protect high streets by creating a fairer business rate system. He will know that at the end of this month we will mark Small Business Saturday, giving us the opportunity to further celebrate the small businesses in our communities. Should he seek to raise this matter either through a debate of his own or indeed through the budget, then I'm sure it will be a popular topic.
Mark Sewards.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Like my honourable friend, the member for Southend Weston Lee, who's no longer in his place, my inbox is filled to the brim with emails about fireworks. Now, when enjoyed as part of professional displays, as part of national holidays, they can be absolutely magnificent, but my constituents are concerned that they're actually being deployed well outside of normal hours and well outside of holiday times. So on behalf of my constituents, those with PTSD, those with autism, veterans and families with pets that have all contacted me, can I press the Leader of the House for an urgent debate on this issue, on the need to update firework regulations for the modern era?
Deputy Speaker, the honourable gentleman is right to raise this issue. He's not the first today, and he's certainly not the first over the past few weeks. This is an important matter, particularly at this time of year. It is true that there are rules around the use of fireworks, but as we all know, they're not always kept to. So this would be a popular topic for debate, judging by the number of people who raise it with me.
As I suspect, it's an important question on Scottish football. Richard Baker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Will my right honourable friend not only join me in congratulating the famous and heroic Scottish football team on their qualification for the World Cup this week, but also the charity Five Gingerbread in my constituency, who this week were also successful as finalists in the Centre for Social Justice UK Charity Awards, recognised for their stargazing strategy and brilliant work to tackle child poverty and promote employability for lone parents. So will he consider allocating time for Parliament to debate how we can best support the vital work of third sector organisations in providing employability programmes?
Deputy Speaker, I certainly join him in congratulating the Scottish football team for the first time since 1998 qualifying for the World Cup, and in case he needs reminding, there was a Labour government then too. I'll absolutely join my honourable friend in congratulating Five Gingerbread Charity for making it to the Charity Award finals, and I want to thank them and volunteers across, charities and volunteers across the country for the vital work that they do to support families and in tackling child poverty.
And I thank the Leader of the House for his responses this morning. There will be a few moments for the front benches to swap over. Which brings us to a statement, a fairer pathway to settlement. The Home Secretary.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. With your permission, I will make a statement on a fairer pathway to settlement for migrants. The story of migration in this country is woven through my own. My father came here in the early 70s, my mother a little less than a decade later. Both came to seek a better life, and they found one here. In time, while always proud Kashmiris, they became British citizens themselves, Brummies too, and they brought up 4 children just as proud to be a part of this country and that great city as them. This is not just my story. This is the story of many of my constituents in Birmingham Ladywood, and it is the story of many millions more across this country. I, and so many others like me, are patriots. Mine is a love of a country that is forever changing, while something essential about us always endures. It is a patriotism that finds room for those who trace their roots back many generations and those who, like me, do not. But I worry that this broad patriotism is, for some, narrowing, and that a vision of a greater Britain is giving way to that of a littler England as anger turns to hate. Some will choose to scorn this analysis. They would rather we simply wished it away. But those who look like me do not have that luxury. Our lives and the lives of our families are more dangerous in a country that turns inwards. So we have no choice but to ask, what is the cause of our division and how might this country be united? As I said earlier this week, the pace and scale of migration in this country has been destabilising. I spoke on Monday of the 400,000 who have claimed asylum since 2021. But that figure pales in comparison to the net migration figure in the same period. In that time, 2.6 million more people moved to Britain than left. To place that in perspective, around 1 in every 30 people in this country arrived in those 4 years. This is the result of the extraordinary open border experiment conducted by the last Conservative government. In that period, now sometimes called the Boris wave, immigration controls were drastically lifted. This was most notable in the case of the health and care visa, where minimum salary requirements were dropped. An attempt to fill between 6,000 and 40,000 jobs led to the arrival of 616,000 individuals between 2022 and 2024. Over half were not even filling jobs in the sector at all, but were rather dependents of those who were. And abuse, as any Member of Parliament can tell you, was rife. I would think my support for migration need not be stated, but after some of the questions I faced on Monday, I think I had better do so. Migrant communities have, for generations, been woven into the tapestry of British life. While I will never believe in assimilating communities, we have achieved cohesion because different communities have integrated, retaining their distinction within a single pluralistic whole. This makes demands of those already here to remain open to new arrivals, but more than that, it demands something of those arriving. To settle in this country forever is not a right, but a privilege, and it must be earned. Today, that is not the case. Settlement, or indefinite leave to remain, comes almost automatically after 5 years' residence in this country. At that point, a migrant gains access to many of the rights of a British citizen, including to benefits. As a result of the unprecedented levels of migration in recent years, 1.6 million are now forecast to settle between 2026 and 2030, with a peak of 450,000 in 2028. It's around 4 times higher than the recent average. That will now change. As this government announced in its immigration white paper, the starting point for settlement will move from 5 years to 10. To ensure this is earned, new criteria will be added, which will act as a disqualifying bar for those who do not meet them. Firstly, the applicant must have a clean criminal record. Secondly, they must speak English to A-level standard. Thirdly, they must have made sustained national insurance contributions. And finally, they must have no debt in this country. While these criteria set the bar that everyone must meet, there are a series of other tests that have today been published for consultation, and these either add or subtract from the 10-year qualifying period. To recognise the particular value to society they play, the government proposes the following. Those who speak English to a degree level standard could qualify for a 9-year path to settlement. Those paying the higher rate of tax could qualify at 5 years, while those on the top rate could qualify after 3, the same as those on global talent visas. Those who work in a public service, including doctors, teachers, nurses, would qualify after 5 years, while those who volunteer, subject to this consultation, could qualify at between 5 and 7 years. Not subject to consultation, the partners of British citizens will continue to qualify at 5 years as today. And this is also true of British nationals overseas from Hong Kong, who will qualify at 5 years in honour of our unique responsibilities to them. All grants under the Windrush and EU settlement schemes also remain unchanged. While some will be able to qualify for settlement earlier than 10 years, others will be forced to wait longer. Once again, these are subject to consultation, but the government proposes that those who have received benefits for less than 12 months would not qualify for settlement until 15 years after arrival. For those who have claimed benefits for more than 12 months, that would rise to 20 years. To encourage the use of legal routes into this country, those who arrive illegally could see settlement take up to 30 years. As has already been set out, refugees on core protection will qualify for settlement after 20 years. Although those who move to a work and study visa could earn settlement earlier, and those arriving by a safe and legal route would earn settlement at 10 years. This consultation is open on some cohorts of special interest. This includes settlement rights for children, members of the armed forces, and victims of certain crimes. As well as considering the responsibilities that are expected of those who seek a permanent life in this country, the consultation also raises the question of the rights that will be provided. Specifically, it proposes that benefits might not be available to those who have settled status, reserving them instead for those who have earned British citizenship. Finally, this consultation addresses the question of the so-called Boris wave, specifically the cohort of lower qualified workers who entered the country along with their dependents through the health and care visa, some of whom are never expected to be net economic contributors. It is right that we apply more stringent controls for this group, and for that reason we propose they should wait 15 years before they can earn settlement. Crucially, for these and every other group mentioned here, we propose these changes apply to everyone in the country today who has not yet received indefinite leave to remain, though we are seeking views on whether there should be some transitional arrangements available. May I make one thing absolutely clear, though? We will not change the rules for those with settled status today. These are people who have been in our country for years, even decades. They have families here, wives, husbands, children. They've worked in our hospitals, taught in our schools, and have been contributing to our society for years. Fairness is the most fundamental of British values. We made a promise when we gave them settlement, and we do not break our promises. The Reform Party, I note, not present today, have said they will do this most un-British of things. The Tories have said that they will, but then said that they won't, and I am left in as much of a muddle about their policy as they are, that perhaps the Shadow Home Secretary might enlighten the House today. But I can be clear that on this side of the House, we won't change the rules for those with settled status. Madam Deputy Speaker, as this consultation shows, we also listen to the British public, and I encourage all those interested to make their voices heard. Today, I have set out what we propose, and perhaps more importantly, why. I love this country, which opened its arms to my parents around 50 years ago, but I am concerned by the division I see now, fuelled by a pace and scale of change that is placing immense pressure on local communities. For those who believe that migration is part of modern Britain's story and should always continue to be, we must prove that it can still work, that those who come here contribute, play their part, and enrich our national life. While each will always retain something of who they were and where they came from, they become a part of the greatest multi-ethnic, multi-faith democracy in the world. And with that, Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Home Secretary Crisfield.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I, as always, thank the Home Secretary for advance sight of her statement. Well, she's had a busy week. I wonder if this burst of hyperactivity has anything to do with her leadership bid. But as her shadow, I will say this: I am rooting for her. I am rooting for her in her tussle with the Health Secretary as to who gets to replace the Prime Minister, although I fear my endorsement may not be entirely helpful with her colleagues on her side of the House. Now, let me start by saying this. Immigration under successive governments has been far, far too high. That has included illegal immigration, which since the general election across the Channel has surged, with 10,000 illegal immigrants crossing just in the 75 days the Home Secretary has been in post alone. Last year, the first year of a Labour government, there were a record ever number of new asylum claims, and the number of illegal immigrants accommodated in hotels has gone up under this Labour government, even though they promised they would reduce numbers. But of course, besides illegal immigration, on which this government is so clearly failing, legal migration has been far, far too high as well, absorbing the equivalent of half the new housing supply in recent years. Allowing mass low-skilled migration is actually bad for the economy, not least when we have 9.5 million working-age people here out of work. And mass low-skilled migration without integration has placed all kinds of pressures on society, not least because there are 1 million people here who don't speak English at all or properly, or the fact there are 10,000 foreign citizens in prison. Where I suspect we do agree is that limited, very limited, high-skill migration is a good thing, but the days of mass low-skill migration must come to an end. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, there is much in this statement I support, not least because so much of it is so familiar. The idea of a 10-year route to ILR is something that we proposed in amendments to the government's bill, I think around about 9 months ago. Inexplicably, the Labour Party inexplicably voted against those measures here just a few months ago, and now they've adopted them. We also proposed removing benefits from foreign citizens, including those on ILR who don't have British citizenship, and this consultation document now looks at doing the same thing. So I am delighted, Madam Deputy Speaker, to see that the Shadow Home Secretary, upon arrival at number 2 Marsham Street, has got out the copy and paste function on her laptop and started copying and pasting conservative policies. Now, I do, however, have one or two detailed and specific questions, which I am asking in a spirit of constructiveness, given she has adopted so many conservative policies. Now, she said importantly that these policies on ILR qualification would apply to those people here already. She is absolutely right to say that, and I support it. She mentions transitional arrangements. I would just urge her to be very cautious about that, lest it creates loopholes. But does she have an estimate she can give to the House as to when these new measures will be implemented? Because the rules that she referred to took effect, I think the previous rules around legal migration started in January 2021. So those people arriving on those rules will become, under the present ILR rules, eligible from January 2026, just a few weeks' time. So when will these changes get implemented? I hope as soon as possible. Now, she also mentions that to qualify for ILR at 10 years, you need to have made national insurance contributions. I've tried to get through the consultation document in the last half an hour. I think I'm right in saying that the qualifying threshold is to have earned £12,570 for a period of 3 years. She'll perhaps correct me if I've got that wrong. But that does strike me as a very low level of earnings, and I would urge her to consider setting that level higher. £12,500 for 3 years would not represent a net economic contribution to this country. I think that threshold should be set a great deal higher, and I would urge her to seriously consider that. Now, she also mentions the possibility of volunteering, getting people ILR at 5 years rather than 10. We know how people game the system when it comes to immigration, for example, by pretending to convert to Christianity to get asylum. So I would urge her to just draft those rules very carefully and be extremely cautious about that, lest she creates some loopholes. I would also ask her to consider adopting one last Conservative policy, since she appears so enthusiastic about them, and that is to introduce a binding cap on legal migration, voted for by Parliament each year, so this House can democratically decide what the level of inward migration is. She's adopted so many of her other policies. I strongly urge her to adopt that last one as well.
Home Secretary.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I suppose I should start by saying I'm pleased to see that the Leader of the Opposition let the Shadow Home Secretary have a go today. He seems rather overly concerned about my personal future. May I suggest that he should worry about his own and that of his party? And one good way to secure the potential future of the Conservative Party would maybe start with an open and honest acknowledgement of their track record in government. Yeah. Dare I say it? Maybe even an apology for messing up the system so badly in the first place. I have to say, given their current track record, they barely have the right to ask questions, let alone propose solutions. Like settlement, it's my view that you have to earn the right to offer solutions, and I would say to him, one way of earning that right would be to apologise for what the Tories did first and foremost. He asked a specific question in relation to when these changes will come into effect. It's a 12-week consultation. It will end in the middle of February, and we would anticipate making changes and to begin the phase-out of those changes once adopted from April 2026 of next year. As he knows, the immigration rules usually change twice a year, every year, and that is when we would begin to start making some of those changes. Some potential changes would require technical fixes and solutions that may take a little longer, but the intention is to start from April of next year. He made the point on the qualifying threshold around £12,000. He will note that that's the national insurance contributions threshold that we have used, and that is specifically because that is one of the quickest ways to establish whether somebody is in work or not. So it's designed to give an indication of the period spent in work. He will, of course, know that there are different income thresholds for the different routes by which people can come into the country, and those are not being changed. He made a valid point on ensuring that the new system, as we develop it, mustn't have any loopholes. I will, of course, be very alive to that. And as we discussed at length in the House on Monday, there is a relationship between some types of visa overstaying and, of course, coming straight into the asylum system as well. And I'm very alive to those risks, and we will do everything we can to shut that down. This will be, in the end, a whole package of reforms across both the illegal migration system and dealing with asylum, as well as legal migration, to clamp down on abuse and retain public confidence in running a migration system overall and in the asylum system in particular. And what can I say on the CAP? I mean, the CAP has had a long life in the Conservative Party, and I would just gently say they never managed it in 14 years themselves. I don't think we're going to be pursuing that failure now.
Dame Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I applaud my right honourable friend on many points, not least debunking the idea that a cap is going to solve anything or is even achievable. Madam Deputy Speaker, there's a lot of detail in this, but one of the issues now is that people currently going through the system have to apply repeatedly to extend their discretionary leave to remain until they reach settlement status. This is costly for them, cumbersome for the Home Office, and does nothing to help them integrate or work in the community. I've had the opportunity to meet with her junior minister on this issue. Can she give any assurance to the House that the Home Office is looking at this to ensure that those who are welcome here have a less burdensome system to go through, which will also hopefully save money and enable the Home Office to focus on more urgent issues?
Well, my right honourable friend brings a huge amount of personal experience to this discussion, having been a minister herself and with a very august track record as a select committee chairwoman. So I will always take very seriously any suggestions that she makes, and I will discuss with my ministerial team the detail of some of what she suggests. I think our principled position is it is right that people pay fees for visa extensions. It is right that we move from a 5-year to a 10-year period, a qualifying period for settlement. We're not consulting on whether we move from 5 years to 10 years. That is already decided policy. What is set out in the consultation are some of the other questions that sit underneath that. But I would happily discuss with her, because I know she has big experience in this area, Home Office capacity and how we build a system that can work effectively, not only in terms of being delivered by the state, but providing certainty for the people that ultimately do want to make their lives in this country.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Max Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Before I begin, I beg your forgiveness in taking a few extra seconds to reflect on the exchanges in this chamber on Monday. I would like to use the opportunity to put on the record my utter contempt for those who abuse the Home Secretary and anybody else who is abused based on the colour of their skin or their religion. That is not what Britain stands for. The Home Secretary, of course, will choose the language that she wants to use in this debate, and I will choose my language too. The constructive and moderate tone of voice that I and the Liberal Democrats will use in these discussions about immigration will remain, as will our attempts to help offer feedback as and when the government brings forward proposals. The number of Liberal Democrats in the Chamber today shows that we are not ignoring this. Indeed, we've got as many in the Chamber today as the whole of the Reform Party, and none of them are here. We're aware, as others, of the issues in communities up and down in the country, and for immigrants who live here too. We agree with the Home Secretary that faith must be restored in the immigration and asylum system, as I stated on Monday, and we agree that requires changes to policy. And of course, most of what we're discussing today is distinct from some of the discussions we were having on Monday about desperate refugees and asylum seekers. We also believe that it must be acknowledged that prior to Brexit and the removal of nearly all safe and legal routes, this country had a more rational and controlled approach to immigration and asylum. That party is responsible. We think it is regrettable that the government has not made quicker progress towards building stronger links with Europe in its work on getting control of our immigration policy. And we believe that discussions about regaining control must also come with a proper discussion about the opportunities that provides and the potential risks. Changes to pathways to settlement must be with regard to the economy, to public services and fairness to individuals. We are concerned about the chilling effect some changes could have on the economy. The UK is fast becoming a less competitive place for science and innovation, not least because of Brexit. The cost of a 5-year global talent visa to Britain is £6,000 per person. That is around 20 times more expensive than comparable visas in our competitor countries, where similar schemes typically cost a few £100s. It is no surprise that so few researchers come to Britain on these visas every year. Cancer research alone spends £900,000 annually, money that could be better spent on setting up research labs instead. The government must also be careful about the effect its rhetoric and policy will have on our public services. The NHS is heavily reliant on nurses and staff who are not British nationals. So has the Home Secretary made an assessment of the risks that some will leave, and what steps is this government taking to develop domestic talent in the health and care sector?
Thank you. I thank the Lib Dem spokesperson. I don't propose to revisit the detail of our exchanges on Monday, but what I will say to him is I will always listen to constructive contributions wherever they come from in this House, and I will reflect on the points that the Liberal Democrats will be making in order to be constructive. One thing where we will perhaps continue to disagree is I think it's just important we acknowledge that there is concern across our country. It is not made up, and it does demand answers of politicians. And I'm just that is a point of I hope now agreement between us. I think he made a point in relation to the asylum system. Forgive me, I didn't pick it up directly. So if I don't address it now, he's welcome to write to me on that point. Again, I don't propose to go into the details that we discussed on Monday on the asylum policy statement. But one of the things that I did make very clear is the number of those arriving on small boats in this country is exactly the same almost as the number that overstay visas. So there is a relationship here in the overall migration system between legal migration and then illegal migration, and that overstaying and then coming straight into the asylum system, and in particular into asylum accommodation at the point at which a visa ends and somebody overstays, is a very real problem with very real significant numbers of people doing that, and that is something that I think it is incumbent on us to resolve, and that is what the totality of all of these reforms are designed to do. He will, of course, know that the government has made huge strides in resetting our relationship with the European Union, and these are matters that we discuss very closely with our counterparts in Europe, and I think that the progress since the EU reset has been considerable, and we will continue to build on that. Once again, though, I don't propose to revisit old debates. We live in a new reality, and we are forging a new path ahead. We will, of course, want to give certainty to people who are already in this country. That is what we are doing with the consultation that we have set, and I have given certainty, for example, to British citizens who wish to bring their dependents over, those who are here from Hong Kong, where our arrangements will not change, Windrush grants, EU settlement grants as well, none of which are affected by the consultation. People have known for a while, since the government published its immigration white paper, that the qualifying period would move from 5 years to 10. He made a point about fairness to individuals. I would just gently say I agree agree about that, because fairness and certainty to those who've come here to work and make a contribution to our economy is absolutely important. I think what our reforms are designed to do, however, is also to think of fairness to those who are already here and building public confidence in the system overall. He made some points on the National Health Service, and I know that the Secretary of State for Health takes very seriously future labour market reforms and making sure there is a pipeline of the required labour in order to make sure that our NHS keeps going, and we absolutely value the contribution that those from overseas who've come to work here in our National Health Service have made, are making and will always continue to make.
Dame Leah Griffiths.
Thank you much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, I have a constituent born and bred in Llanelli who is unable to bring in his foreign spouse because of the current earnings limit of £29,000. So the Home Secretary will be very aware that the government's Family Financial Requirements Review notes that a threshold of around the region of 23,000 to 25,000 would allow most British workers in full-time minimum wage jobs to qualify. So when will she be considering this review and looking again at the fairness of the current earnings thresholds?
What I would say to my honourable friend is we always keep those thresholds under review, and we will continue to do so in relation to family and bringing dependents over.
Sir Edward Lee.
Well, the Home Secretary loves our country, and I love her efforts, frankly, because it's not just the fate of this government that depends on her success, but good community relations and saving dozens of lives at sea, and, let's be frank, probably our political fate also. So will she undertake to be judged not just by the strength of this announcement and words spoken in the House of Commons, but actually results, so that we do actually make a real contribution to stopping these boats? And so will she be prepared to constantly ratchet up the pressure so that if you're sitting in France, you think, is it worth the risk? I've got virtually no chance of being allowed to stay in Britain forever. I will have my case reviewed very regularly, every 2 years. I will be sent back where I came from when it's safe, and otherwise I'll go back to return hub. Can we not all agree on that?
What I would say to the honourable gentleman is results are all that matters. It's incumbent on me to think about the way that we have to reform this system, to make a public argument for it, to win that argument, to persuade people, and then to get this done. What I care about now is making sure that we can deliver these proposals, and we will do so. And then I need to make sure that the Home Office is in a position to make sure that we can really run a system properly, administratively, and also fairly in the future. That is what matters. This is a low-trust environment for the public. All of us involved in politics know that, and in the end the public have heard a lot of rhetoric from a lot of people, but this government intends to get on and deliver and to win the trust of the British people.
Louis Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the Home Secretary's statement, and in particular what she said about the more than 75,000 nurses who are working in our NHS who arrived in this country since 2021. Those nurses and other healthcare professionals were actively encouraged to come here to fill the gaps left by the previous government's failure to do NHS workforce planning. And since they arrived, they've served our communities and cared for our citizens with distinctions. So can I welcome what she said about maintaining a 5-year route for those who are engaged in public service? And could she just confirm that that would apply to NHS staff like those that I've mentioned? And could she furthermore say that how she will continue discussions with DHSC colleagues to ensure that there will be no unexpected reduction in NHS workforce staffing in the months ahead?
Yeah, well, my honourable friend is right about the contribution that those nurses and other staff in the National Health Service are making. He will know that we are consulting specifically on the element of the proposals that relates to public service and that getting you a 5-year discount on the qualifying period. No doubt he will make his own responses to that consultation. We have heard those too. But of course, in the normal run of things, public service would include those who work in our critical public services.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I broadly welcome the changes to ILR, but I seek clarification about whether there will be revocation for those already settled who break the law. And why is the government proposing making low-skilled workers who are net fiscal recipients wait for 15 years for ILR instead of telling them to just leave the country.
Yeah.
And on the broader question of immigration, the government says it wants to get the numbers down. The Boris wave was a disgrace, that is correct. But of the measures implemented so far by this government, they are projected only to reduce the numbers of people coming here by 61,000 a year. That's before we take into account the new rules for Gaza, for Afghan dependents, and for the schemes launched this week by the Home Secretary. And it's in fact less than the revision by the ONS of the numbers coming last year. So if she does want to get the numbers down, when will the Home Secretary bring forward new policies to make sure that the number of visas issued falls by the hundreds of thousands as soon as possible?
The ability to revoke indefinite leave to remain, those powers are not going to change as a result of this, and he will know that the specific provisions in relation to foreign national offenders are also going to be unaffected. Separately, we are going to review the threshold in relation to criminality because the current rules have worked on the basis that you cannot qualify for indefinite leave to remain if you've received a sentence of 12 months or more, but given the changes that are being brought forward in the sentencing bill and others, we will be looking at all of that threshold in its entirety. He's raised a point around retrospectivity. We will also be reviewing that as we review all of the criminal thresholds that apply here. He said another question in the middle bit, and forgive me, I missed it. Well, if he will write to me, I will come back to him because I think he's asking about wage thresholds. He made a final point, which I did pick up, which was around modelling and essentially the numbers that we're talking about and whether 61,000 a year reduction is the right number. Let me just say to him, look, I will be coming to this House on a regular basis to be held to account for the delivery of these reforms and those that I set out on Monday in relation to the asylum system. It's a big package of reforms taken together. These are the biggest changes to settlement since 40 years, and the asylum package is also, one of the biggest packages of modern times. The combination of the two, I think, is going to keep modellers and others very, very busy over the coming months. But what I will promise the House is we'll be transparent on the data, on the numbers, and what our proposals will mean in practice. That will inevitably change as we design the new system as well, but they will always get transparency from me in this House.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I agree with the Home Secretary that our immigration system needs reform and that people are concerned about it. I think we should also be very clear in this House that we recognise the benefits of immigration to our country, the talents, the jobs, the entrepreneurship it brings in, and that nobody would ever argue that we will bring this country together by tearing families apart. On that basis, then, it is very welcome to hear the Home Secretary commit to a 5-year pathway for partners of British citizens, something that for many of my constituents has been a deeply concerning thing because they wouldn't ever wish the state to tell them who they could fall in love with. But given that some of those people are on different visas here, can she clarify the 5-year term, how that will be calculated, so that we don't inadvertently end up penalising people who fall in love with somebody who came on a worker's visa but has been here for 5 years? Love is love. Let's make sure in this country we welcome it.
None of the rules about marriage in country, as it were, are going to change. But I'd be very happy if she wants to send me some of her constituency examples to have a look at that. I think it's important that we have a distinction between what citizenship unlocks as a set of rights for British citizens compared to those who are working here, who may not have settled status, who may acquire settled status. I think it's right that in the consultation we open a question about what is unlocked in terms of the British state and your rights here at citizenship as well as at settlement. But I'd be very happy to discuss these matters with her in more detail, and I'm sure I will do so over the course of the next few months.
Josh Babarinde.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Many migrant survivors of domestic abuse apply to settle in the UK permanently if their relationship has broken down because of domestic violence or abuse. And the Right Honourable Lady knows just how close this issue is to my heart. So will she reassure this House and survivors of domestic abuse that they will be protected under her reforms and that her changes to ILR will not have the adverse and maybe unintended impact of locking those survivors into abusive relationships?
Well, firstly, let me put on my record congratulations to the Honourable Gentleman for his engagement. Let me also say, he is an assiduous campaigner based on his own experiences in relation to domestic abuse, and he and I have had many debates across this chamber on those matters before, and I respect very much the perspective he brings and the way in which he constructively engages with the debate. I can give him that assurance. We will continue to have pathways to settlement for victims of domestic violence and other vulnerable groups as well. And what we're seeking to do in the consultation is to invite views and perspectives about how some of the changes might have perhaps unintended consequences and how we can ensure that those pathways continue to exist in the future. And I'm sure he will be engaging with the consultation in that regard.
Alison Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I agree with the Home Secretary that fairness must be at the heart of the immigration system, but can I ask her to say a little bit more about the route to settlement for the Ukrainian families who generous constituents of mine have opened up their doors to following the horrific invasion of their country?
Well, friend, nothing we've said today changes the position of those who've come to this country on the Ukrainian scheme. That is a bespoke scheme for the people who've arrived here from Ukraine. It's in fact not seen as a refugee route, it's seen as a temporary scheme, but all of those provisions that are in that were supported by us in opposition. They continue to be supported by us in government, and nothing in relation to the position of Ukrainians in this country is going to change as a result of anything in the asylum policy statement or the command paper today.
Sir Julian Lewis.
As the descendant of immigrant grandparents, I have a high degree of empathy with the Home Secretary's opening remarks about her own family. Would she agree with me that the reason that both main parties are facing the possibility of an electoral bloodbath is not so much about the overall levels of immigration, but about that fraction of it, which is still a very large number of people who come to this country on small boats and by other illegal means. We do not know what they believe, we do not know what values they have, and in many cases, because they destroy their documents, we do not even know who they are. Can she explain how the measures she's outlined today will have an impact on deterring that sort of person from breaking into our country?
Well, let me say to the honourable gentleman, I've acknowledged the way that the way the system is working or not working, being more the appropriate way to describe it, is causing deep unease across the country, including in my constituency, including of those people who are of immigrant backgrounds themselves. And it is that sense of unfairness. A lot of people in my constituency regularly report to me what they see as abuse of visas, overstaying as a particular problem. Others are more concerned about small boats. I acknowledge that those concerns are legitimate and real and felt deeply across the country. That's why I think it's so important that we rebuild public trust in the overall system, both dealing with illegal migration and legal migration as well, based on the principles of fairness and contribution, and give public confidence that the rules that we have can be maintained, can be enforced, and that they will be followed properly. He's right that things like the destruction of documents and other ways in which people seek to frustrate our ability to remove them from this country is driving some of the discontent. That is why the reforms that I have set out in the asylum policy statement are designed to say to those making the calculus in the north of France, don't get on a boat, it's not worth it, that is not the way to come to this country. And it is why, as we build safe and legal routes into this country, which will be a clearly much more privileged way of entering this country with a faster path to settlement, as I've said today, at 10 years, it will show people making that calculus very clearly which path is worth it and which one is not.
Barry Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the assurance that the Home Secretary has given to those who have achieved indefinite leave to remain and have settled status in this country. That certainty is really important. She will know that in my own constituency, I have many families who are from Syria, many families who are from Afghanistan. They came on the Syrian program and under Operation Pitting, and they have limited leave to remain. But they are deeply worried, from what the Home Secretary said, as to whether they will ultimately be deported from this country. Can she give assurance to those who are currently seeking ILR, who came on those programs, that they will be able to follow the path that was set out for them when they arrived? Would she give that assurance and make sure that this country will never do a deal with the Taliban to deport back from this country women and children?
Well, we will always have specific obligations in relation to not returning anybody who's arrived and arrived in this country seeking asylum or has been granted refugee status. We would not return those individuals to danger. We will abide by our international obligations, and I hope I did make that clear in the debate on Monday. The ability of us, though, to have new rules that look more carefully and more regularly at whether a country is safe for citizens to be returned to, I think is important, and it is a shift in the way that we do things. But we will never return people to face danger, and I'll be happy to look at some of the examples that he has raised today in more detail with him.
Seamus Logan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I first of all want to apologise to the Home Secretary for missing part of her statement, but I have read it. Can she confirm whether any assessment has been carried out on the economic impact on Scotland of extending the ILR wait time to 10 years and beyond? And if not, why not? So whatever, Madam Deputy Speaker, the needs of Wales and Northern Ireland, Scotland's economic and workforce needs have once again appeared to have been ignored. Does the Home Secretary understand that such a blanket policy risks exacerbating skills shortages, threatening vital sectors, and making it harder for communities to thrive? And incredibly, for a so-called Labour government, this lurch to the right now appears to favour the wealthy over the less wealthy.
Secretary.
Really, Madam Deputy Speaker, he will know that immigration is a reserved matter. That will not change. The thing that's holding back the labour market in Scotland is skills and education policy, which is devolved, and it's on the SNP to sort that out.
Natalie Fleet.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In 2024, in the run-up to the election, I knocked on door after door where they told me that they were absolutely sick of our broken immigration system that we had inherited from the Tories, and they did not trust reform, who aren't here today to tackle. I welcome the intervention from our Home Secretary. Does the Home Secretary agree with me that in order to be the open, tolerant and generous country that we know that we are, we must get order and control at our borders?
Secretary.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. This is an open, tolerant and generous country. And what I have acknowledged in the reforms I've set out both today and on Monday is that there is a condition to unlocking the full extent of that openness, that tolerance and that generosity. And it is about having order and control at our borders, a fair, managed asylum and immigration system where the principles of fairness and contribution are at the heart of it. That is the way that we can prove to the public it is possible not just to have an asylum system at all, but one that they can also be proud of.
Dr. Kieran Mullen.
I'm not sure it helps the Home Secretary's cause for me to have a great deal of respect for her, and I thought her interventions this week particularly pointed towards members of her own party on the left, that actually they are going to make the cause they choose to champion more difficult if they don't get this system under control as a whole was very important. Actually, those people that support asylum and refugee processes and want them to be there in the future need the system to be brought under control. But my sincere question relates to what I would describe as the tinkering around the edges of the human rights laws. The Home Secretary must know that whatever she does to clarify the fringes of the rulings that the ECHR has made over the years and created the case law that forces our judges to rule in the favour of spurious claims, can't change that. That those rulings are those rulings, unless we're willing to, at the very least, derogate from some elements of the court's decisions. How does the Home Secretary really think that we can override those well-established rulings that give enormous amounts of rights to people when they're making their asylum claims?
Yeah, that's right. That's enough of it.
Well, look, I think he and I have an obvious point of difference on the European Convention on Human Rights. This government will not be leaving that European Convention. We don't see the case for derogation or any other measures. We do believe it is possible to achieve the reforms that we need by legislating for the way in which Article 8 applies to immigration cases, by defining family life and more tightly drawing up what is known as the public interest test. We will debate that legislation in this House in a great deal of detail, but I hope to show to everyone who is currently a sceptic of our ability to stay in the ECHR and get control of our migration system that it is possible to do both of those things, to abide by convention rights, the Human Rights Act, which has brought those rights into our domestic legislation. It's a very important piece of international, it's an important international treaty, and we don't see any reason to leave it or derogate from it. But I do hope that members opposite will engage in good faith on the changes that we seek to make to Article 8 and the immigration rules in particular, because we think that that is one of the best changes we can make to get control of our migration system.
Members will notice that we have got two debates after this business. So if I could ask remaining members, I'm going to finish this statement in around 10 minutes. So if I could ask remaining members to please keep the questions and then the Minister keep the answers short. Orrinda Juss.
Deputy Speaker, excuse me, as I am someone who was not born in this country, does the Home Secretary agree that we should not stop talking about the benefits of immigration whilst managing migration, and as she has already acknowledged that we will always offer sanctuary to those truly fleeing peril, does she also accept that for those people we should be making settlement and integration into British society quicker and easier and not more difficult?
Well, firstly, I hope he will reflect on how I opened my statement today and how I closed it. I see the benefits of migration. I wouldn't be here if this country hadn't welcomed my parents. It is literally the story of my life and how I have managed to get from there to this dispatch box today. So I very much feel those benefits personally, and I will always speak up for them, as I have done today, as I did on Monday, and as I will always do as I make the case for the need for these reforms out there in the country. I hope he and others will always support me on that. I know they will. I've also made clear that we will always offer sanctuary. I want us to be a country that offers sanctuary to those who are in need. That is why it is so crucial that we get order and control back into our asylum system and open up new safe and legal routes. And it is important that today I've confirmed that those safe and legal routes will have the earlier 10-year path to settlement. That is what will enable the integration we all want to see.
Slade.
Deputy Speaker. In the summer, I spent the morning with Anushka, a senior social care worker for Altogether Care in Wimborne. She and her colleagues earn more than the earnings threshold and came here on the understanding with their families that they could make a new life here, contributing to society, paying their taxes. And the recent hostile narrative is making her and others consider leaving for places like New Zealand and Australia. So can the Home Secretary confirm whether Anushka and her colleagues doing jobs that cannot be filled by British workers who won't do the work will be considered public sector workers?
Good question.
Well, these will be matters for the consultation. I would encourage her to engage with that. We have specifically put in an element around public service because we recognise the specific contributions made by those who fill the gaps in our labour market that we are not able to do otherwise. What I would say to her on the general principle is settlement is not a right. It is, I think, absolutely fair for a government to say that it's something that has to be earned. It is not unusual for countries to change their settlement requirements. That's quite normal, happens all over the world, as British citizens who work abroad know all too well as well. And the proposal for going from 5 years to 10 years will not change, but all of the other measures that I've said today are subject to consultation. I would encourage her to engage with that.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Home Secretary's statement today, the care and the fairness with which she has crafted these proposals and the incentives that they imbibe too. Because from my work on the International Development Committee, I've seen the immense negative impact of global displacement and the lost over $20 billion of economic activity every year from developing countries. And then, of course, there's the impact, too, of asylum accommodation on our overseas assistance budget. So does my right honourable friend agree with me that these measures might, whilst they might ostensibly seem harsh, there is nothing progressive that well-meaning people on the left of politics should be excusing in a situation where thousands of people are risking their lives across the English Channel from already safe countries?
I think it's immoral if we stand by and watch people make dangerous crossings, pay thousands of pounds to criminals and put their lives and those of others at risk, and we stand back and do nothing. I think that would just be a total dereliction of duty. I also think it would be a dereliction of duty for a Labour government to continue to preside over a broken system or not have the mettle to get ahead and reform that and watch us lose public consent for having an asylum system at all. I think it's existential for us having public consent for that asylum system, and that is why all of these changes are so necessary.
Yeah. And with a very short question, Bobby Dean.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And can I thank the Home Secretary for a confirmation about the 5-year pathway for Hong Kongers. That is a promise kept to them. The statement today was otherwise a series of push measures, and I'm always fascinated by how when you come down to the individual decisions to make within the system, how much more difficult it gets. So if I could push her on the Boris wave, which she has criticised, the vast majority of those figures were made up by Hong Kongers arriving here under the B&O scheme, Ukrainian refugees and student deferred visas after the COVID pandemic. So which of those measures does she think was a mistake?
Well, look, I was very clear about our responsibilities towards Hong Kongers, that the issues in relation to the Ukraine scheme are not going to change, but he will also know the stats in relation to health and care visa holders, primarily those who came to work in adult social care work. They will be the main contributors to the settlement increase between 2027 and 2029, because they will be making up nearly half of all settlement grants in 2028. So look, I think the figures here really do speak for themselves. It is important that the government moves to deal with such a vast number that is happening over the next few years. I think it is right that we therefore extend the path to settlement and ask some questions about how we manage the situation in the future.
Sarah Russell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thank you, Home Secretary, and I entirely agree that we need control of our borders in this country. In respect of transitional arrangements, over the next 12 years there will be an 83% increase in the over 80s in my constituency. Health and care visa workers are currently providing critical services to many of my constituents and supporting the NHS as well. Please can she confirm how the transitional arrangements will ensure that that care continues to be provided to my constituents?
Well, look, the Health Secretary and his department are, of course, always reviewing and considering the arrangements we need to make sure that we have a workforce capable of sustaining the National Health Service. We do have an ageing population that brings its own specific challenges as well. What we are talking about here today is not preventing people from being able to work in our National Health Service. It's about the pathway to settlement. It's about extending from 5 years to 10 and then thinking about the rules that we need that might bring that number down from 10 and closer to the 5, or that might increase it instead. And I would encourage her in that spirit to engage with the detail, and I'd be happy to talk to her offline as well.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Home Secretary announced a consultation on a 5-year pathway to settlement for those that work in the public sector to recognise the particular value they play in society. Please will she put this to the vote of MPs to ensure that we can ensure that those that work in organisations fundamental to the public sector, like those that work in hospices, including the amazing hospice in my constituency, Woking and Sandbear, are always included in the 5-year pathway?
All of these measures will be taken through in the usual way.
And with the final question, Mark Sewards.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm absolutely delighted to hear the Home Secretary announce that we will keep our promise to British national overseas visa holders from Hong Kong. It's something I've been working with my constituents on over the last few months to lobby the government on, and I'm delighted the government has listened. Now, as well as transnational repression, they bring other issues to me too. Many Hong Kongers in Leeds South-Western Morley are highly skilled, they have excellent qualifications, but the employers in this country don't necessarily recognise them, which makes it that much harder to get the first job. So will the Home Secretary work with other departments across government to help employers in this country recognise the amazing contribution that Hong Kongers can make to the UK economy.
Well, he makes a very important point. It's not the direct responsibility of the Home Office, but I will ensure that those conversations are happening across government, and I will make sure a minister from DBT writes to him on this matter.
And that concludes the statement. I'll give a few moments for the front benches to swap over. Welcome to the Select Committee statement on behalf of the Justice Committee. Andy Slaughter will speak for up to 10 minutes, during which no interventions are taken. At the conclusion of his statement, I will call members to ask questions on the subject of the statement. These should be brief questions, not full speeches. Can I emphasise that questions should be directed to the Select Committee Chair and not the relevant Government Minister? Front benchers may take part in questioning. I call Andy Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Backbench Business Committee for allocating time for me to make a statement on behalf of the Justice Committee. This is the 7th report of the Committee on Rehabilitation in Prisons. This time last year, the Justice Committee began its principal inquiry to look at the crisis of reoffending against the backdrop of a broken criminal justice system. Around 80% of all offending is reoffending. This figure alone suggests there is a serious issue that HMPPS is not currently serving its stated mission of rehabilitating the people in its care. The purposes of prison are clear. They include punishing, protecting the public, and rehabilitating offenders. The opportunity for offenders to be rehabilitated in prison should not be considered a luxury. It is a fundamental necessity to ensure that those who have done their time can return to society as law-abiding citizens. Yet the evidence we receive paints a starkly different prospect. Instead of being places of reform, too many of our prisons have become places of stagnation, where offenders languish and rehabilitation opportunities are scarce. Our inquiry into rehabilitation has taken place amidst a prison capacity crisis. Overcrowding, staffing shortages and deteriorating infrastructure have created conditions that is actively undermining rehabilitation. The committee found that the current conditions across the prison estate are simply not conducive to reform. Overcrowding has led to arbitrary prison transfers, disrupted sentence progression and reduced access to purposeful activity, education and family contact. With the demand for prison places set to keep increasing, the government must set out the steps it will take to ensure that rehabilitation is not compromised, alongside how it intends to manage demand and supply. The challenges do not end there. In the 12 months to the 30th of June 2025, there was a leaving rate of almost 12% among prison officers. These staffing shortages are not just an operational inconvenience, they are a public safety risk. As we heard recently, in the year to March of this year, 262 prisoners have been released in error. Overworked staff, outdated systems and inadequate training has meant that when officers are stretched to breaking point, the likelihood of administrative errors rockets. Current levels of wrongful release are not isolated blunders, they are symptomatic of a system under intolerable strain. Alongside this, high turnover, poor recruitment processes and limited professional development have all contributed to a culture that hinders rehabilitation. Governors lack the autonomy to lead effectively, and the current staffing model is unsustainable. The committee recommends that prison staff should receive training at least annually, with more frequent support as they progress through their career. Furthermore, the prison estate is in a state of disrepair. Dilapidated buildings and broken infrastructure limit access to rehabilitative spaces and contribute to poor mental health. Despite recent capital investment, it remains unclear how the government intends to address the £1.8 billion maintenance backlog. This backlog is not just a financial figure, it represents real barriers to rehabilitation. We call on the government to provide clear breakdown of how funding will be used to address this backlog and to ensure that future investment is targeted at improving prison conditions and rehabilitative activities. The committee is deeply concerned by the widespread failure to meet the statutory minimum for time out of cell. Many prisoners are locked up for 22 hours or more each day, with limited access to fresh air, showers
or rehabilitation. This lack of time out of cell undermines efforts to reduce reoffending and contributes to poor mental health and disengagement. Purposeful activity, including education, work and offending behaviour programmes, is central to rehabilitation, yet it is inconsistently delivered and often deprioritised. The sentencing bill rightly aims to incentivise good behaviour and engagement in purposeful activity through its earned progression model. But this ambition will fail if purposeful activity remains inaccessible. The committee calls for a renewed focus on ensuring all prisoners have access to meaningful activity and for time out of cell to be formalised, standardised and data on it to be published going forward. Education is the cornerstone of rehabilitation, yet prison education is underfunded and poorly delivered. Participation rates are low. 50% of prisoners are not in education or work. For those that do take part, Ofsted ratings remain poor, with 75% of prisons inspected in 2024-25 rated inadequate or showing no improvement. It is therefore unsurprising that 2/3 of offenders are not in education or work 6 months after release from prison. Given this, we are alarmed by reports of significant real-term cuts to prison education budgets of up to 50%. We expect the government to clarify the rationale of any budget reduction. Conditions across the youth estate are also in decline. Children in custody are entitled to 15 hours of education per week, yet the committee heard that this minimum is routinely not met, and children are spending up to 23 hours a day in cell due to the failure of HMPPS to manage behaviour effectively. As well as making every effort to meet the statutory minimum of 15 hours for education, HMPPS must set a statutory minimum for time out of cell in young offenders institutions. Health and wellbeing services are failing to meet the needs of prisoners. Mental health support is inconsistent, and operational pressures prevent timely access to care. Women in prison face acute and complex health needs, yet the system is failing to provide even basic support. Although the government has set out its ambition to reduce the number of women in custody, it is unclear what action will be taken for those currently in prison. The committee expects the government to respond with a clear plan for how it will meet the health and well-being needs of the women currently in its care. Remand prisoners now make up 20% of the prison population, the highest level in at least 50 years. Yet they remain excluded from much of the prison regime, including access to education. We heard that remand prisoners often spend extended periods in custody, only to be released directly from court following conviction without any support or intervention. This raises serious concerns about how the government expects these individuals to avoid reoffending. Rehabilitation must be available the moment someone enters custody, and therefore remand prisoners should have access to all parts of the regime should they choose to participate. There is plenty more to be done to improve outcomes for offenders. The committee will shortly commence part 2 of its inquiry by examining how rehabilitation continues in the community for those released from prison, as well as those serving non-custodial sentences. A further report will follow, making not only recommendations for changes in how community sentences work, but also long-term recommendations for structural reform across the criminal justice system to once and for all end the cycle of reoffending. But let me be clear, the time for action cannot wait. The sentencing bill represents a welcome opportunity to rethink how we reduce reoffending, but legislation alone will not deliver rehabilitation. I apologise that it's a bleak prospect that I've set out, but that is the reality of prison life, and prisons are simply not working, and particularly not working in the field of rehabilitation. As this report sets out, it must be matched by a renewed focus by HMPPS to deliver better time out of cell, education and health and well-being services. I urge the government to take these recommendations seriously, to promote rehabilitation effectively, and to ensure that our prisons are places of reform, not despair. The government has inherited a very difficult situation here. It is trying to address that in a number of ways, but the crisis in prison cannot be underestimated, as the symptoms have shown recently, in wrongful releases and other tragedies in the prison sentence. We have to deliver a system that truly serves the public good, and that will only come in the longer term with effective rehabilitation in prisons.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Honourable Gentleman for presenting the committee's statement. With the Chief Inspector of Prisons recently concluding that the outcomes for children in custody are not improving, and the urgent notification issued to Oak Hill Secure Training Centre, and given that it's children we are discussing, does the Honourable Member agree that the conditions across the youth estate are completely unacceptable, and as recommended, the government should produce an action plan for youth custody?
I do agree with, and I thank the Honourable Member, who's a very effective and active member of the committee, for that question. We shouldn't ignore the fact that youth custody is one of the successes of the prison system, in the sense that over the past few decades, the numbers of young people in custody have gone down from, I think, over 3,000 to around 400 now. But those who remain in youth custody in a rather confused variety of institutions are not being well served. I think it's the intention of the committee to look at youth custody and young people in prison itself, but we can only examine and recommend. I think it is for the government to look, as a matter of urgency, at the crisis that exists also in the youth estate for those who remain in custody.
I thank my honourable friend for his statement. Does he agree that reducing reoffending through rehabilitation is not only the key to reducing the prison overcrowding, but also the court backlogs too? And it is unacceptable that prisoners have to very often make the choice between either engaging in work or education, or accessing their basic needs, such as having time out in fresh air, having a shower or a hot meal.
Again, I thank my honourable friend for that question. It's certainly true that there is a close relationship between the crisis in the courts and the crisis in prisons, and a good example of that is that, well, as I mentioned in my statement, the number of people on remand is at a 50-year high, and they are occupying prison places for far longer than they should be. It's also true that if we can break the cycle of reoffending, and I've said that 80% of offences are reoffending, then numbers in prisons will come down. That in itself will make rehabilitation in prisons a lot easier. That will mean that fewer people are becoming before the court. We're in a downward spiral at the moment. We have to not only stop that, we have to reduce that, so that lower offending, lower offences against the public at large mean fewer people in prison and fewer people before the courts. It's a big ask, but if we don't start, we won't get there.
Sir Julian Lewis. In light of the urgent question we had earlier today, does the chairman of the committee believe that it is essential for the purpose of rehabilitation that prisoners should be protected against indoctrination by convicted terrorists?
I do believe that very much so, and I believe that is what this and indeed previous governments have set out to try and achieve. I hope that the report of Jonathan Hall KC will shine a light on what is not working in relation to that, and certainly given his background, I believe that it will. The government then has to implement that, because one of the problems with prisons, and we covered this in another very recent report on drug culture in prison, is the operation not just of extremists, but organised crime, and the lack of control, the lack of organisation and disciplines, not only in the prisons he talks about, but across the prison estate, is one of the most worrying aspects of prison life at the moment.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There is an epidemic of violence against women and girls in this country, and the government has a stated aim of reducing this by 50%. In that context, it is absolutely critical that our prisons play their role in rehabilitation. Does the chair of the Select Committee agree with me that while 70% of people are being released from remand, having spent either directly because they're found not guilty, or in fact because they're found guilty but on the basis of time served. We're currently missing a huge opportunity to do rehabilitative work because that is typically not offered to those on remand at all.
Again, I thank my friend very much for that question. Numbers of women in prison and indeed of young people are a small percentage of the prison population, but they give particular cause for concern. I mentioned in my statement the health and mental health needs of women prisoners, which are higher, levels of self-harm are higher, and there is a clear need there. It's a need, I think, to be fair to the government has recognised, which the government has policies to address. It's the practicality of that we're lacking now, because at the moment the levels of support that are required. So I welcome the fact the government has said it wants to see, very clearly it wants to see fewer women in prison. What we need to know is how is that going to be achieved from this point onwards.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Around half of prisoners are neurodivergent, and the population of young prisoners with ADHD is around 10 times higher than in the population at large. And with such specialist targeted support needed for these prisoners, we've heard that they've been let down by the system and they can't access the right time at the right support regardless of the new system that's in place. Does the Honourable Member agree that the delay in producing an update to the Neurodiversity Action Plan is unacceptable and it really must be published straight away?
Lady, as the newest member of the committee, I'm pleased to see her here today. Yes, she's obviously got behind the brief very quickly because we are waiting for an update on the Neurodiversity Action Plan. Many levels of societal problem are reflected to a much higher level in prisons, whether that be people with learning difficulties, people with literacy problems, and indeed neurodivergency. That's not a coincidence, but it is a wake-up call to the fact that these issues have to be addressed. If we are, rehabilitation is for all prisoners, and special steps need to be taken in relation, particularly neurodiverse prisoners. So I hope we are going to see. I need to see the Minister, very capable Minister in her place, is listening to all this, and I'm sure she will tell us very soon when the action plan is going to be updated.
And that concludes the statement. We now move on to the presentation of bills. Presentation of Bill, Bobby Dean.
Tax Relief Evaluation Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 14th of January.
Friday the 14th of January. Presentation of Bill, Max.